Welcome to Charts This Week. My name is David Linton, I run Updata, and this week's edition comes to you from London for Monday the 9th of May. And so we start by looking at crude. Crude on a nice uptrend over the last few months. That's what we expect, of course, this time of year. We are through the cloud, but we look back to last year, we had this similar pattern up till around this point in May, and then we started to fall away. So we are just a little bit wary that we may be at the top point of the seasonality, and in fact that does show up quite well in the seasonality chart, where we start to see we're heading into territory where, based on what prices have done in previous years, there's a 10-year weighted average seasonality. You do that in your Updata system from this menu here, seasonality, and we can see that at best we might just fall off a little bit, or worse, we head into the second part of the year where we really do start to fall. The traditional summer driving season, that peak now comes just a little bit earlier than previous years. We are through on the cloud on the 60-minute chart, so we're back into a sort of bullish frame here. We had a nice run here, small retracement back. We're back into bullish territory in the short term. Remember, this is days ahead, and there is an upside target to 48.55, which would be a new high for the year. So we need to just be aware that it could go either way, but just keep an eye on the shorter term charts. If we look at WTI, these prices are all coming from Thomson Reuters Icon, of course. Updata sitting on top of your Icon system. Shift T, and we see here that we just again we have upside targets and a downside target, so just keep an eye on that. And then on the 1 minute chart, if you're trading crude in the very short term, you can see here as well we have got upside targets to around 47.80. So keep an eye out on crude this week. Looks like it might stage a small recovery, but we do have that bigger force of the seasonality acting against us. Here we look at Henry Hub. Henry Hub has had a bit of a stronger period the last few months. That's what we expect at this time of year. We're going into the strong period before we get into July, and then we see the real sell-off. So do be just aware that we are heading into territory where we normally see prices fall. We are in this sort of range at the moment, around 2 to 230. That has crept up a little bit, but this $2 mark is now pretty important. We are back below the cloud on the 60-minute chart, but we are in very choppy market conditions here at the moment. Shift T will give you a downside target of 182, but we need to break really below 2 for that to come into play, and we do have still some upside targets. If we look at the 1 minute chart, if you're trading Henry Hub, these are essential, the 1 minute charts. Shift T, and we can see that we have quite a mixed picture. If we take a look at European gas, looking very strong at the moment, through on the daily cloud, and now the lagging line coming through as well. So we are starting to see a long-term recovery. This hasn't happened for quite some time. We're starting to see some recovery in MBP prices. This is MBP front month. Correlation with Brent is quite strong, so rising Brent this week would help. And if we look at the 60-minute chart, we see here how we've had that run, we've pulled back, and we're running again. If we can go higher than this 32 level, then that will be very good for the price. Shift T, and we see here that we have no real upside targets to speak of on that chart. Go to the 1 minute chart. If you're trading European gas, remember this data coming either from your Trayport OTC screen or from the Updata OTC broker feed, real-time broker consolidated prices. And we see here very strong support kicking in there, so it does suggest that there's some strength to this recovery. TTF, much the same. We're not quite through on the cloud yet, so that's quite key. If we look at that, we see here that we have just come across, and then on the NCG and Gaspool, much the same picture. So European gas market is looking quite strong at the moment. If we look at German power or European power markets, German power actually above on the cloud for the first time in a very long time. So prices really looking quite promising. This really is just a very long-term recovery starting to unfold here. If we look at the 60-minute chart, Shift T on this chart, will give us the trends and targets. 2580, so that's the best we've seen for a while. And now the downside targets are considerably higher, not sort of below the 20s, so we are seeing a recovery. If you're trading German power short term, the chart to look at, of course, is the 1 minute chart, Shift T. We do have some downside targets here, back to the sort of 23 level, so just be aware of that. Keep an eye on your 1 minute charts, and of course our morning calls. Nordpool looking very strong as well. If we take a look at currencies, dollar just staging a bit of recovery, but below the cloud on the daily, back above on the 60 minute. On the euro, we're seeing this 116 level was the top there. We are above on the euro, so the euro is just showing a bit of strength there. If we look at the 60 minute chart, we have pulled back a bit. Shift here will give you the trends and targets. Euro dollar 110.20, so that's 3% downside if we break this trend really, and there are still some upside targets to about 118, so euro could go either way. Dollar strength just kicking in at the moment, and of course if you're trading or looking at euro very short term, Shift T, and we can see here that we've got the downside targets as well. So looks like euro will come under pressure in the very short term. If we take a look at sterling really hit the cloud here. The buffers just came on the price when the lagging line hit the cloud, coming away. We might just wander out sideways here, but watch that this week. We are below on the 60-minute chart, and of course if we look at the targets, the T key on your system, 139.60, so back below 140 there, so that could be interesting. Sterling, euro, we're seeing here just holding steady at about 78 cents, so 78 pence to the euro. And Swiss franc, we're seeing a little bit of a recovery there, and sterling Swiss did get back up to the 143 level, but really still pretty bearish in the medium to long term. If we take a look at stock markets, we start with the S&P 500, got back above the 2050 level. This 2050 level is becoming quite critical now, and we did get back above that last week. But the weekly cloud is really hard to see at the moment where we see this going, because it just came below the cloud for a bit longer than you would like, just recovering, and we're now back into the cloud. This 1980 level really is the support level there now. Fall through 1980 and we would be worried, and then coming back of course to test this 1800 level would be bad as well. Market failing to get above 2100 is worrying for the S&P 500. We are bullish on the daily, we're bearish on the 60 minute at the moment, and then it's really looking to the short-term targets. The medium and long-term targets not giving us a lot to look at the moment. The short-term downside target of 1975, so that is that 1980 level, but there is upside targets to 2150. The market really needs to get to 2150 to break these new levels. If we look at the NASDAQ, we had a sort of strong recovery in the end of last week on the markets after not a great week, and we see here we are just failing to make the new highs again on NASDAQ. Quite worrying here that we did make a higher high, unlike the S&P at the end of the year, and we did make a higher low, so that was encouraging, but we just do seem to be running out of steam a little bit here at the moment. If we look at the daily, that is bullish, but testing the cloud again, 60-minute bearish. We do have 2.5% downside pressure there as well. If we take a look at European markets, we'll start with the FTSE. FTSE really is in the doldrums. It just hasn't managed to get to, it's staged a few sort of short recoveries and then just pulls back. Up quite strongly this morning at 0.75%, but interestingly, we're still below on the weekly chart. The weekly cloud, the resistance was really tested here, and so this is still a bearish looking chart for FTSE in the long term. Medium term we're above the cloud, short term we're below. This downside target of 60.57 was given at 62.23, and that target was effectively met. When you see the target's been given and met, that is a little bit worrying. We do have an upside target in the medium term, but we do have long-term downside targets, so FTSE still doesn't look great. If we take a look at the Xetra DAX, here we see up very strongly today, but below the weekly, just above on the daily, but still below on the 60-minute. So mixed picture there as well. Take a look at Asia. We'll start with Tokyo. Tokyo, of course, had a bad start to the month, and we just are teetering along here, below on the daily, below on the weekly, and below on the 60 minutes. So Tokyo is still looking pretty bad. And if we look at, let's have a look at China. China down 2.7%, 2.8% last night, and that is worrying. We are wandering out of this cloud. We are still below on the daily, below on the 60 minute, and really have got a big downside potential now if we go to new lows on China. The Chinese market could be the one that unseats us all. We take a look at the Sensex index, the Indian stock market. Up 1.78% overnight, so this is looking much stronger than other Asian markets. Still below on the weekly. Daily is quite clearly above, 60 minute not quite yet above. We do have some nice medium-term upside targets here for the Indian market, 11.7%, 19.22%. So India is still looking like one of the bright spots potentially. That's it for this week. Until next week, happy charting. See you then.